Many have argued that the podcast is just the same as radio or merely an extension of the traditional AM/FM radio. Both are designed to distribute audio information, and the only major difference on initial observation is that they are published on different platforms. We will discuss this discourse, the preconditions that enable podcasts, and the impact podcasts have had on our time and space in this video essay. The first radio was developed in the 1890s, but it was not until 1919 that the first radio broadcast, the radio station KDKA in Pittsburgh, occurred. And from 1920 until the 1950s, radio was the dominant means of receiving news. And for the first time, news was spread to the masses. The dominance of the radio was changed rapidly with the introduction of television. However, radio continued to be one of the main sources of the dissemination of audio information throughout the 20th and 21st century. Next major innovation, which impacted on delivery of audio content, was the creation in 1999 of Web 2.0, which is described as a set of next intergenerational technologies. These tools make it easier to create online applications to behave dynamically. At the same time, the first release of Really Simple Syndication, or RSS, was released by Netscape. RSS allows for audio content from the web to be downloaded efficiently and quickly. There was considerable friction over copyright laws. However, as Justin Potts states, consumers realise that they can download audio files from the internet and they like it. They like it a lot. To complete the innovation circle which gave birth to the first podcast, in October 2001, Apple released the first iPod. So for the first time, there was a singular device which you can fit in your pocket and you can take with you wherever you go. You can download music of your choice, store and play the music when you want it. However, it was not until 2005 when Ricky Gervais, an English comedian, launched his first podcast series. This podcast series became very popular and had over 100,000 downloads in the first 2 days of being released. Ricky Gervais was noted to say that we didn't have a boss. We didn't have rules or restrictions that you do on radio. We could do it when we wanted for as long as we wanted. We could put it up there and then the people could go to it at any time. As stated, the dominant discourse present when we talk about podcasts are that they are as radio or merely an extension of radio. However, in 2014, Andrew Dubar argued that we are now in a comfortable position as many podcasts are radio and some sound like radio, but we should be careful about defining them as radio. He's not alone here, and Richard Berry also asserts that podcasting is a radiogenic practice. However, its uniqueness must be considered. Berry goes on to say that podcasts' unique and distinct features are enough now to consider them alongside radio rather than part of radio. The uniqueness of a podcast starts from its subject matter. Podcasts are open-ended. You can talk about whatever you want for as long as you like. And further to this, there is no governance or program quotas, which importantly opens up opportunities for minority or non-mainstream ideas, so they can get their information about their subject out to the public. Radio stations are generally driven by ratings and governance, which does not allow, in some cases, to discuss alternative points of view. Further to this, a podcast is a deliberate act of listening. It can be listened to immediately or later. It is flexible. It can be accessed anywhere in the world and allows the listeners to be in total control of what, when and where they listen to the content of their choice. There is no doubt that radio forms relationships with their listeners. However, there is a suggestion that podcasts are forming hyper-intimate relationships with their listeners, partly due to talking directly into the ears, and the podcasts are being listened to in an intimate setting, i.e. the headphones. These relationships are one of seductive intimacy. You cannot end up listening to a podcast by accident, as in radio program. It is a deliberate action. The word podcast is an amalgam of broadcast, the distribution of audio information, and the iPod. And whilst there is no doubt that podcasting was initially a form of radio, is there now enough evidence to see the podcast as a unique medium? Or is it just that publishing platform that makes the distinction between the radio and podcast? Or does it really matter?